today's shows with over combined 50 years of experience of forecasting and macro research here in the studio. We have Ylva. You have 25 years of experience, out of which 7 years as director of forecasting at Konjunkturinstitutet. Furthermore, also a board member at AP3 and Riksgälden, earlier director of macroeconomics at Ministry of Finance and head of research at Riksbanken, and years as an economist. Moving to you, my friend Andreas, 25 years of experience as well in the EU Commission, Ministry of Finance, Nordea, 8 years as a chief analyst, and now head of forecasting and macro research at Swedbank for the past 5 years. As a common factor in all positions, macroeconomics and monetary policies. Wow, welcome. I'm so happy to have both of you here.
Thank you. Don't raise the expectations too much. One difference compared to us when we have all those years of experience is that we don't necessarily get better, is my experience. Actually, over the past few years, we have done such big failures, pandemic, the inflation crisis. So that's the caveat here.
But maybe you tackle them better with this kind of experience that you would have without. But let's just dive straight into this. Based on the current economic forecast, what would you say are the primary challenges that you anticipate businesses will face in the next 12 months?
Who would you like? Should I kick off?
You can start, Ylva, if you want to.
But let's turn back. So last year we had a sort of an economic slowdown in Sweden, and it was very slow in Europe. And this year we now sort of expect a more modest growth going forward. Inflation is coming down, and so are interest rates. But we have to remember that even though inflation is coming down, we still are at a price level that's 15 to 20% higher than it was 2 years ago. So the high price level is affecting both households and firms, and sort of putting headwinds towards consumer and firm demand. So I think the high price level, even though we're going to see lower interest rates, they're still going to be higher than what we had before we entered this crisis.
So you would say that this is a new normal that we need to get used to?
Yes. So I get a bit frustrated when journalists that interview people, common people on the street, asking, so now inflation is coming down, how do you feel? Well, prices are still increasing. So they're not going to increase as fast.
And what's your take on this, Andreas?
Well, on your question, globally, I think the politicians perhaps are the biggest threats to businesses, and the uncertainty of actually economic policy going forward. That regards protectionism, which is a super strong trend, but also industrial policy in general. Which rules will apply. Especially given the US presidential election this year coming up. In Sweden, the challenges, I guess, is we will be happy just if the interest rates come down a bit.
I feel that we are a lot of people signing that one. But how well do you economic forecasts account for geopolitical tensions and their impact on Sweden? Starting with you, Andreas.
Well, actually, currently the geopolitical tensions, if we talk about the situation in the Middle East or Ukraine, they are not super important for the global economy nor the Swedish economy for the moment. Obviously, it was super important 2 years back when we saw natural gas prices, energy prices lifting. But now, also given the quite severe situation in the Middle East, oil prices they are contained. Natural gas prices, electricity prices are contained. So actually, the importance of those two wars on the economy is not that. It's not that influential, actually.
So I can say, so it's more media thing than actual economic. So I can think. When you have the pandemic behind you, I think firms are they know how to adapt to quick changes, and they are a bit more relaxed, not relaxed, but they think, well, this is another one, but if things change quickly, we know how to cope. So I think they're not as anxious as they might have been had we not had the pandemic.
Ja, jag älskar
Okay,
sånt där.
thank you so much for
Men det är
that.
två
And
saker. Dels har jag inte gjort det på
moving
ett tag, och sen
forward, can you
är det
provide
2 år
guidelines
jättefort om
or
tid.
predictions
jag har
on
fått en
how
timme nu, det här har
sectors
varit
critical to
supercoolt.
Sweden's economy
Men 16 minuter är
might
inte mycket.
perform in the near future?
Den
What would
största
you say about that?
presentationen jag gjorde var
So for the
2012
past 2 years, we've seen very strong development
i
in
San
manufacturing
Francisco.
sector.
Jag kommer inte ihåg vad den vänjen heter, men de hade precis
but
lanserat
the whole
den senaste
manufacturing sector
iPhonen som
has
kom. De
gained
hade precis
from
lanserats på samma
the
scen.
weak
Det
krona.
var
They
700
made
pers
big
i
profits.
publiken.
And they have had a sort of
Och jag
pent-up
stod
demand,
med stora
pent-up
strålkastare och
orders,
så här.
and they
Och
had
så
to
är det en
work them
prestation
off.
på
And
45
now we see
minuter.
orders falling.
Det
So
är min största.
manufacturing going forward, we're going to see a slump. Then obviously
Nej,
the
alltså,
private property
jag hade inget att göra med
real
iPhone.
estate sector
De hade
Sweden
presenterat
has
den
been
några veckor
very
innan,
hardly
fast det var på
hit
samma
by
scen.
increasing
Ja.
prices, falling property prices, increasing
Jag pratar
interest
om
rates. So, and so
vad
not
kan det ha
until
varit?
property
iPhone
prices has
4?
sort of stopped falling,
Ja.
which we believe are around now or to the summer,
Ja,
and
måste
then
vara.
they start
Jag har gått fort
easing
sedan
up
dess.
slowly, then we might see a change. So those are two
Exakt.
businesses or industries that we see have a sort of
Oh, yeah.
bleak
Mm.
outlook.
And do you have anything to add to that, Andreas?
Yeah, I think we have to be clear that the current situation in Sweden is very
Är det
split.
någon-
Neither me
fyra,
nor
tre?
Ylva nor anyone in the audience has actually experienced such a split, diverse development where we have households suffering. It's the worst times since the 90s. And we could actually see that in terms of what's happening on the housing market. And then meanwhile we have exports booming, we have investments in the business sector booming. So this highly divergent pattern is extreme. That I think going into next year, as Ylva mentioned, will change a bit. So for next year I would expect that household consumption will pick up a bit if interest rates comes down. But on the other hand, we think that the export investments will slow down a bit next year. That's our forecast.
Det ser jag
So
också, för det gjorde
even
jag
though we
med. Jag
see
pluggade i
that things
Uppsala.
are sort of picking
Gick
up,
ut 98,
consumer demand
men,
is picking up,
jag
the prices are not
hade
rising
säkert
as fast,
3
wages
år.
are rising
Men jag
faster
gjorde
than
vettiga
prices.
saker.
We still
Så det var
see
det jag sa
that
till
the
min dotter
economy
att
is slowing down, and we will see an increase in unemployment going forward. So firms, they need to adjust how many they have employed. It's not going to be a big wave of unemployment, but it's going to ease up.
Well, touching upon on that, what would you say are the most critical barriers that could hinder Swedish economy's growth in the next, let's say, 6 to 12 months?
I think it is confidence, and I think now we are in this. We expect, we see that inflation has come down. We are all expecting interest rates to come down. Central banks are going to lower interest rates, but what if they didn't? That they had to sort of change or not have to? Then I think confidence would get a real hit, and we would have a great uncertainty going forward. How is this all panning out? So I think that's one of the big risks.
And Ylva, in an environment that's filled with uncertainties, what sources of information or indicators do you trust most to guide you in your strategic financial decisions?
Well, I think that's a sort of a wrong question to put to me, because we don't do strategic financial decisions. Those are you doing them. We try to sort of paint a picture of where we're going, and we don't only look at a few indicators. So now we're making a new forecast. We're publishing it on Tuesday. We started like 4 or 5 weeks ago. We have 20 meetings. We look and turn on very many stones. So it's difficult to say which are the most important, but the ones that we really try to follow, of course, how are inflation and GDP, unemployment, those are the key economic for us indicators. But I don't know, what are you thinking? You're
No, I
in different
agree. I
sector.
mean, we have plenty of indicators that we follow for trying to do the forecast. But if I would single out one indicator that is important for financial markets, that is the US 10-year Treasury yield. Because that one really sets the tone for interest rates globally, in Europe, also in Sweden, so it will be important for our mortgage rates. It also actually influences highly the mood on the stock market. It also affects actually the Swedish currency. We have seen a strong correlation over the past 3 months at least, or 3 years actually, when the interest rates go up in the US, the SEK weakens. So that would be my favorite indicator.
And given the diverse area of risk from sanctions to economic shifts, talent scarcity, cybersecurity threats to inflation, what would you then say do you perceive as the greatest of threats to financial stability in the near term?
Well, for financial stability, out of all those risks that you listed, I would say cyber threats. I have no macro foundations on that, but we hear more or less every day big corporates getting those ransomware attacks. So I think that will be very important, and this, of course, a risk for financial stability, and we will probably see a lot of investments going into the cybersecurity space over the next few years.
And in the light of the recent economic development, how might consumer behavior in Sweden change, and what will be the implications in the market for that?
Should I start? Consumer behavior, I think, would be in Sweden quite cautious. Even though interest rates, things will improve, as Ylva mentioned. I think we will see some cautiousness. People will tend to prefer to amortize. The mortgage rates will still be much higher than they were a few years back. So I think it will take a bit of a time for the consumers actually to get confidence and then turn around and go to the shops again.
Well, we disagree a little bit. We think that we have had negative or falling consumption for 6 quarters out of 7, except for the last one. So I think there is a pent-up demand for consumption. So we are a bit more optimistic. It's not like it's going to be shop, but we think we are going to see if the forecast that we're painting is the correct one, with interest rates coming down and inflation is continuing coming down, then we at least see that it's consumers coming back, but it's still that the high price level is putting a lid on how much you can consume.
Beautiful. Thank you so much both for joining us today.
Thank you.